Washington, D.C., 1941. Eva Delectorskaya called Roma in New York. "I've struck gold," she said, and hung up. Arranging an appointment with Mason Harding had been very straightforward. Eva took the train from New York to Washington and booked into the London Hall Apartment Hotel on 11th and M Streets. She realized she was subconsciously drawn to hotels that carried some echo of England. Then she thought that if it was becoming a habit, then it was one she should change, another Roma rule. But she liked her one-room apartment with its tiny galley kitchen and icebox and the gleaming clean shower. She reserved it for 2 weeks and, once she had unpacked, she called the number Roma had given her. Mason Harding. She introduced herself, saying that she worked for Transoceanic Press in New York and she would like to request an interview with Mr. Hopkins. "I'm afraid Mr. Hopkins is unwell," Harding said, then added, "Are you English?" "Sort of, half Russian. Sounds a dangerous mixture." "Can I call by your office? There may be other stories we can run. Transoceanic has a huge readership in South and Latin America." Harding was very amenable. He suggested the end of the afternoon the following day. Mason Harding was a young man in his early 30s, Eva guessed, whose thick brown hair was cut and severely parted like a schoolboy's. He was putting on weight, and his even, handsome features were softened by a layer of fat on his cheeks and his jawbone. He wore a pale fawn seersucker suit, and on his desk a sign said, "Mason Harding III." "So," he said, offering her a seat and looking her up and down, "Transoceanic Press, can't say I've heard of you." She gave him a rough outline of Transoceanic's reach and readership. He nodded, seemingly taking it in. She said she'd been sent down to Washington to interview key officials in the new administration. "Sure, where are you staying?" She told him. He asked her a few questions about London, the war, and had she been there in the Blitz. Then he looked at his watch. "You want to get a drink? I think we close at 5 or thereabouts these days." They left the Department of Commerce, a vast classical monster of a building, with a facade more like a museum than a Department of State, and they walked a few blocks north on 15th Street to a dark bar that Mason, please call me Mason, knew, and where, once settled inside, they both ordered Whiskey Max, Mason's suggestion. It was a chilly day. They could do with some warming up. Eva asked some dutiful questions about Hopkins, and Mason told her a few bland facts, except for the information that Hopkins had had half his stomach removed in an operation some years ago for stomach cancer. Mason was careful to mention his department's and the Roosevelt administration's admiration of British resolve and pluck. "You've got to understand, Eve," he said, savouring his second Whiskey Mac. "It's incredibly hard for Hopkins and FDR to do anything more. If it was up to us, we'd be in there beside you, shoulder to shoulder, fighting those damn Nazis. Want another? Waiter, sir!" He signalled for another drink. "But the vote in Congress has to be won before we go to war. Roosevelt knows he'll never win it, not now. Something has to happen to change people's attitudes. You ever been to an America First rally?" Eva said she had. She remembered it well, an Irish-American priest hectoring the crowd about British iniquity and duplicity. 80% of Americans were against entering the war. America had intervened in the last war and had gained nothing except the Depression. The United States was safe from attack. There was no need to help England again. England was broke, finished. Don't waste American money and American lives trying to save her skin, and so on, to massive cheers and applause.